Pearl Harbor is bombed on December 7th, 1941. The Wolfman comes out on December 12th, 1941, the following Friday. So Pearl Harbor's bombed on Sunday. This movie comes out on Friday.
Wow.
So if part of what I'm talking about is how horror films reflect the history of the time, this movie was written by a guy named Kurt Seideback, who is a German Jew who had escaped Hitler's Germany just in the fucking nick of time.
Wow.
History, I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Hi, and welcome to HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck, where history is a party and everybody's coming. I'm your host, Dawn Brody, and this is a bonus episode. Okay, because during October in 2022, my buddy Jose Barrientos and I sat down and we went through the history of horror movies, girl, decade by decade. And we talked about the first ever horror movie ever made. We talked about what movies have scared us personally the most and why. And then we also talk about history's influence on horror movies, right? Like, what does the Cold War have to do with Michael Myers? All right, did you watch Contagion during the pandemic? Walking Dead? Guess what? Everybody did. And we're going to tell you why. I mean, this is really, it's a perfect episode as you start to plan your scary movie watching for the month ahead. Okay, so go get the popcorn and a weighted blanket and then cuddle up on the couch with me and let's get started. I am over the moon to have as my guest today, Jose Barrientos. Thank you for being here. I know I've plied you with jasmine tea.
It's the best jasmine tea I've ever had.
You're going to be putty in my hands. Putty in my hands.
What's in this tea?
I'll tell you in about an hour and a half. Jose Barrientos is a comedian. This is how we know each other anyway. But you are also a hacker,
yes.
Which fantastic, the best job in the world. But it seems to me as I've known you and as I've researched you, that you're kind of more of a high-tech prankster than a hacker, even though you are capable of like changing the direction of a satellite. Mostly you just like fuck with your friends' phones.
It's actually really interesting because I think people come about. So I am actually by career, I am a professional hacker. That's what I do.
So explain more about how that works, who employs you and what you do exactly.
Okay, so I'm not allowed to say what company I work for in public forum. But what I will say, which sounds even creepier, I spent a year in DC working for the government as a federal contractor. And so a job description would be that I had to hack into federal organizations, and then when we do physical operations like pick locks, impersonate FedEx guys, swindle my way in, beat like metal detectors and stuff like that, just to see how far I can get. And then once we get remote access, we exfiltrate a little bit of data, not enough to be compromisable to prove that their security posture is garbage. It's garbage for you guys. So that's kind of what my day job is.
You got this job because you got busted for hacking kind of amateurishly out of your mother's house.
Yeah. Well, it all starts that way. And actually, it's funny because, people are like, what, are you a comedian and a hacker? But we're very similar. The only difference is the level of social anxiety. No, I'm serious, because what you're doing is you're taking something, a premise, you see how it works, and then once you really understand it, you can shift it to do something different. That's all hacking is. It's like I know enough about computers that I know what to do to make them do something they're not supposed to do. So, and that's what we're doing with language. We're just taking a narrative and switching it to make it funny.
Yeah.
Similar algorithm to horror, by the way. Twist the expectation.
Exactly. And horror and comedy, as we're going to discuss, have been holding hands really since the very beginning. Tell me about your relationship with spooky stuff. Are you generally a purveyor of spooky things?
Purveyor of spooky things.
Like with video games, books.
I love all things spooky. And I read, like, Stephen King is probably one of my favorite authors, and some of the older stuff as well. But I grew up in a Hispanic household, And so like the occult and things that are creepy are very real and part of our culture. So like there are legitimate stories in my family about like duendes, and it's like, well, let's be real here. but they swear.
I do like spooky stuff, and I really like scary movies. But I like them so much they have the effect that they are intended to have on me long after it's over. So I have to be very careful about how and when I consume fiction, books, films, TV shows. I like, for example, zombies. I got a thing for zombies. They've scared the shit out of me. They've always been the scariest thing. You drag a leg and act like the undead for a heartbeat too long with me, and I am shoveling your brains.
Must be terrifying for you to live here in LA.
It is. A lot of dragging feet, a lot of mumbling. I have to be on my guard constantly. And I asked you, leading up to this horror film, HILF, what was your favorite horror movie? And you shot back an answer like, bam.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes, it's the fourth kind.
The fourth kind. You didn't flinch.
No.
2009, Mila Jovovich. And I'm going to try as often as I can to give very brief plot descriptions of the movies in case people haven't seen them. So the fourth kind is Nome, Alaska. Found footage-esque, kind of, this is based on a true story. Mila Jovovich comes out like, I am the woman that this really happened to. And it's about a psychologist whose patients appear to have been abducted by aliens.
Yes.
Generally, that's the plot.
Oh, and it's a really good lead-in because each patient that she has keeps describing an owl at their window. And then when they describe it, it's this like being that's sort of like pale with big black eyes, the way that you would expect an owl to be. But soon you find out that it's not an owl. I watched this film while I was in Baghdad, Iraq, by myself. And it frightened the shit. It was so bad that I couldn't sleep. And I just broke out my laptop and I went to the website that discusses this film. And I was like, no way an owl could carry a grown person. They were like, buddy, it's not owls. And I did that to cheer myself up so I could get to bed. But it had such a profound effect on me. And I can't tell you why. I have this sort of,
because you were alone in Baghdad? Is that where you were?
I was there, yeah.
I mean, that's like, I don't know why I would have been watching When Harry Met Sally if I'm alone in Baghdad. It sounds to me like you kind of did this to yourself.
Oh, yeah, no. It's funny. My ex-girlfriend used to work in the movie industry, or I guess in a way still does. But anyway, she said, like, I was telling her I love horror. And she goes, yeah. Your people are the target demographic for that. And I was like, my people? And she's like, Hispanics, yeah. They're like, they are the most people who watch these things. And so I was like, well, because growing up, that's what we did. We rented scary movies. But I watched that film there, and but it wasn't the only scary film I saw out there. I saw a lot, and they were spooky. I was like, whatever. But that one stayed with me for like a week.
Yeah. My favorite horror movie, this was so hard for me. I was a little depressed. When I asked you, what's your favorite movie, you came back so quick with one, because I was like, maybe he'll do me a solid and be like, well, my top three. Or when I was like, I could throw him a bone if this is too hard of a question to answer. And you just were like, ooh, the fourth kind. Boy, that one really got me. And I was like, God damn it, that means I have to answer with my one.
You can give me a few.
Don't give me that. Okay. No, don't give me that out. I made the rule. Just like in a good horror movie, I made the rule. I'm going to stick with it.
Okay.
Nightmare on Elm Street, the original 1984. I was in middle school at a slumber party when I watched Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time. I love Johnny Depp.
I mean,
and he wears that little half shirt. Oh my god,
it's true. That's how the bed swallows.
Oh my god,
that's how sexy he is.
He's just doughy. He's just
doughy.
like a little croissant in a belly shirt. You want to see a river of blood? I would have broken him in half and made a river of blood. In any event,
dear diary.
In any event, that was before. Before I really had activated that aspect. I was goddamn terrified. I couldn't so much as look at the creases of the cushions on the couch I was sitting on. You know what I mean? It was so scary. I stayed up all night. I'm not sleeping. No, I mean, I just stared at the bay window of my friend Monica's house, waiting for the sky to show some shade of daylight. It was fantastic, Yeah. And Freddy Krueger is funny. There's funny moments. He's kind of irreverent sometimes. You know what I mean? Like Michael Myers is never funny. No. Jason Voorhees does a little bit with the rake. You know what I mean? Never sleep again. What were some of the scariest books you remember reading?
Misery is the first and only book that ever made me jump.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So a nod to King there. Yeah, oh man. I mean, I've read a lot of King. I mean, it's not saying much because he's got a ridiculous catalog, right? And in particular, there's also stuff in Spanish that I read early on. So my mom had this thing where she wouldn't buy me any toys. But if I wanted a book, she'd go and get it for me, regardless of age or language restrictions of any kind. So naturally, a lot of... no, I'm kidding. I was about to say a lot of romance novels. She's like, oh, this book was written by Amanda Anaconda? Okay, I'll get it for you.
Okay, you enjoy.
But yeah, no, so I read a lot of that. As a kid. And I also had to read the Bible, which is terrifying in certain areas.
Totally the first horror novel. Easy.
Yeah, novel, she says. Triggered. No, just kidding. Why don't we call it a library then? Because it's a collection of books, right?
Indeed.
But yeah, no, definitely very terrifying, right? And necessarily so, right? Because fear motivates, as you remarked. But yeah, it's funny because I see scary things in weird environments. I read Stephen King's It during basic training. And to make it more metal, it was lights out. So I was top bunk next to the fire exit sign. So my pages were illuminated in red. Since I'm reading this spooky, so it's hard to be afraid of my drill sergeant when there was a killer clown on loose.
You're like, nice try. Why don't you get some big shoes, Mr. Man? Put a rubber nose on it.
Yeah, let you come out of from the drain. I'm not scared of you. Yes.
So we're going to fuck for the history of horror movies today, Jose. And I want to just start up top by saying that our definition of horror movies for the purposes of this podcast is broad. Is it a slasher movie? Is it a sci-fi movie? Is it a comedy horror? If it's designed to give you a scare, it fits. Perfect. Does it scare you and make you laugh? Does it scare you via an alien? It's not my concern. And I want to tell you, first of all, about my sources. As you know, I'm a historian. I do my research. And this is the primary source of research for this episode. It is called Lost in the Dark by Brad Weismann, History of Film from Around the World. Feel free to leaf through it if you're interested or not. It's up to you. There's great photos. I write all over my books. I write all over my books.
I opened to page 7, and there's text, obviously, but there's right in the side just says horror, boom.
I do. If anyone ever borrows a book from me, know that I write in the margins. I circle, I heart, I underline.
So do I.
It's one of the reasons why I have a very difficult time with e-readers, because I can't do my thing. So that is my primary source of research. It is a joy to read. In addition to this fantastic book, there are some amazing documentaries out there, of course, behind the scenes and making ofs of some of your favorite movies. And I highly recommend on Netflix, there is a slew of documentaries under the Made Us series. So it's like the movies that made us, the toys that made us. And they have in their season a bunch of these classic horror movies. And it's great interviews with the stars, the creators, the special effects designers. You get these amazing behind-the-scenes stories and unknown stuff. And it's like, it's a bubblegum documentary. So there's like a crazy voiceover that'll be like, but things didn't quite work out.
Yeah.
You know.
I saw the Home Alone one, which was really good.
Oh, yeah, that one was really good. I watched that one, too. So in addition to the book and to a couple of documentaries, I also grew up in the 80s in the middle of the woods. So I feel like I just have like a connection to horror movies that is sort of implied. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start with just kind of fear in general, very basic stuff about what scares us and why, because we've been scaring each other since the dawn of time. You mentioned when we first started talking about why we skydive, why we do these physical things that put us in danger, because fear is useful for us. We like to scare each other and we like to be scared. Some examples include the church. And I don't just mean the Christian church, although they scary, girl. I mean, a lot of organized religion, it's sort of a transaction of we'll scare you. Sure. And you want to be scared to help you live better. It's going to keep this fear, will instill in you a useful goodness or make you live right? Psychologically, fear is really important. It's rehearsal for traumas yet to come, and it is a way of processing traumas that have been. We know this since long before modern psychology, that it's a really functional. I'm sure that there was, pretending to be a mastodon in the caves. I'm like, I gotcha.
the old, is there a saber tooth in this thing or not?
Could be.
I feel like fear is so important. I mean, we all have that dream of falling.
Yeah.
Which we were tree dwellers. So like fear of heights was important, or that something is chasing you and you got to run away from it. So it must have been that important that it was imprinted in dream form and passed along ancestors. Amazing. So no, I agree with that.
And short of food and sex, it is something we just seek out. We keep looking for things that frighten us and things that frighten each other and pushing these limits. And once your heart leaps, then you know you've done it, right? Which also makes it a commodity. Fiction, right? Fiction. However fiction is coming to human beings, horror and fear and things designed to scare you have been a critical part of that fiction. Film, however, is really new. So if scaring each other is as old as human communication, film is give or take 100 years old. Sound in film is less than 100 years old. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to talk about film specifically and how film has scared us in ways that other fiction has not. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the very first horror movie ever made, decade by decade. We're going to stop on the films that epitomize that historical time, the film that really seems to be speaking to like the zeitgeist of fear of that particular era, or movies that you and I just love.
Perfect.
The very first horror film ever, 1896.
Wow.
Can you believe it? I thought it was 1920s. I went into this, I was like, it's Nosferatu. That's got to be the first horror movie. Turns out 1896, it's a French film called The Haunted Castle. It's about 3.5 minutes long, and it's a little spooky. It's funny. It's got a little kind of fun stuff in it, but it's skeletons appear and disappear, and a guy thinks he's holding someone's hand, but they're actually dead. Like, it'll get you. It's fun, but also kind of got a little tongue-in-cheek. It's very cool. Then we get into the 1920s and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, but only because what's his face referenced it. And I'm familiar.
It seems I did not know about it prior to doing this research. It seems so obvious now that it is the beating heart DNA of horror film, and frankly, a lot of our modern filmmakers. It's German expressionist. It is basically the story of a mad scientist who has a man, sleepwalker, he is hypnotized. Yeah. The man he's hypnotized looks like Edward Scissorhands meets the Sandman. I mean, dead ringer for this guy, just dark black hair. Yeah. And he, walks really slow, very eerie way of moving, and like strangles and kills people at the behest of this mad scientist. And Tim Burton, you can see Tim Burton in this. Even just the way the sets, like if you watch Beetlejuice immediately after seeing the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, you're like, it's almost a ripoff. Like Tim Burton almost ripped this off. Not the story, but like the sets and the way. It's very, very, very cool.
I'm gonna have to actually watch it because he mentioned it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I mean, I wasn't gonna, but yeah.
Oh, and you have to. And the score is great. Even the text of the font, because it's a silent film. The text of the font is like jagged and crazy, and the music goes along like as you're reading it. Girl, you talked about jumping from a book. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari had a jump scare that got me. I'm watching it on my laptop. I'm doing research for this thing. I'm like, oh, cute. I'm totally dismissive. The silent film. And you know what I mean? It's the thing. And it was great. It's really fun and scary, worth a watch.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
We're moving on to the 1930s. Are you prepared to move on to the 1930s?
Yes.
If we're talking about the zeitgeist of the time, the stock market crashes in 1929. Their fascism is starting to rise in Europe, and we are kind of aware of all of these things. Gangster culture is starting to rise up, and that is in the stew, right? And this is when we get, in the first part of the 30s, our most beloved, most long-enduring universal monsters. You get Dracula and Frankenstein in 1931. You get The Mummy in 1932, and you get The Invisible Man in 1933.
I haven't seen that one.
I was a backlot tour guide, as you know, at Universal Studios Hollywood, the entertainment capital of LA. And one of my favorite things is going through those old monster lots on the trams, the old like sets of all of these old monster movies. And the Spanish language Dracula was filmed in 1931 on the exact same sets. They would film the English language version during the day, the Spanish language version at night. And I watched them both, and with all love to Bela Lugosi. The Spanish language Dracula is scarier. He's a little spookier. He's a little scarier. For whatever it's worth. They're acting. It's just there's an intensity, and it seems like the English language version, maybe because I've seen it so many times, has like this much more camp. And the other one just leaned into ominous. And so it was more scary.
Olaf.
But they look Olaf. Yeah. It is fantastic. But then here's what happened. Son of a bitch. We got all these great fucking movies. People are loving them. We've got film is going out all these places across the United States and everyone's loving these movies. And that's the problem, right? Because why are we having all these screaming half-naked women, scary demonic monsters out there in America's towns? As you know, we still don't roll great with the stuff that Hollywood puts out. So they come up in 1931 with this code. The code. William Hayes comes up with the code.
Is this the rating nonsense?
It is the rating nonsense, but it's so much more like the rating nonsense is like the normal version of what they started with.
Wow.
Which is this code, the length, the innumerable things that you were no longer allowed to do on film would boggle your mind. Some of them you understand. No swearing, no sex. Okay, they weren't really doing a lot of that anyway.
Sure.
But they were but also no representations of white slavery. No sympathy for criminals can be represented in your plot. Oh. And nothing quote unquote gruesome.
What does that mean?
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Sympathy
for criminals. You can't disparage the clergy. So just an example of how this affected it. So Frankenstein comes out in 1931. Bride of Frankenstein comes out in 1934. And it took forever. It was like they had to take it down. They had to take all these things out. It was a miracle they could even get it on because they said that Frankenstein had a God complex, the doctor. And so they needed to change that and it was like, yeah. So there was like this, they call it the drought from 1936 to 1939. We were like, I don't know. What are we supposed to do
keep
here?
Making Passover specials and
exactly. And it just keeps going. Okay. Then we hit 1940s. Okay. And the 1940s, of course, you've got World War II. You've heard of it. I think Germany invades Poland in 1939. Pearl Harbor is bombed in 1941. So we get us into the 40s just with this dominating our zeitgeist, our films, our entertainment, our everything. And I think that is best epitomized by the horror movie The Wolfman from 1941. Have you seen this one?
No.
It's technically part of like the Universal monster canon, but it comes out 10 years after Frankenstein and it's in the world of this code and it's, so it was like they had to kind of round out a lot of these sharp edges, but it's good. It's still pretty scary.
Is it like werewolf or?
Yeah. Wolfman, werewolf. He sees a pentagram on his palm. It's very eerie.
That tracks.
It tracks.
Oh, writer's rooms.
But here's what's super fascinating. Exactly. So Pearl Harbor is bombed on December 7th, 1941. The Wolfman comes out on December 12th, 1941, the following Friday. So Pearl Harbor's bombed on Sunday. This movie comes out on Friday.
Wow.
So if part of what I'm talking about is how horror films reflect the history of the time, this movie was written by a guy named Kurt Seidebach, who is a German Jew who had escaped Hitler's Germany just in the fucking nick of time.
Wow.
And he was unambiguous about what the Wolfman represented. He said he saw normal people turning to monsters all around him.
Sure.
And this is a quote from him. It still gives me goosebumps. He says, "I am the Wolfman. I was forced into a fate I didn't want, to be a Jew in Germany. I would not have chosen that as my fate. And the swastika represents the moon. When the moon comes up, the man doesn't want to murder, but he knows he cannot escape it."
Wow.
And it isn't as common for the creators of horror to be as aware and as articulate of where these monsters and these themes are coming from. But for Kurt Seidebach, he had no ambivalence about
Probably
that.
These days, but I suspect in those days they were a little more about archetypes.
Yeah.
So, fascinating.
And then 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 200,000 people, give or take, are murdered by our country in this brand new technology. Right?
Fat man, little boy.
Fat man and little boy tends to fuck with, wow, that was good, right? Because it ended the war. Oh, God, but we're not good guy. And what is this? And what can be done? And this dominates the fears of us still today, of course. So we go into the 1950s. With our atomic monsters. And they, not only in the United States, but out of Japan. In 1954, Godzilla. And they were not ambivalent. They were like, Godzilla is partly the bomb, just this thing. It's
nuclear, for crying out loud.
This fucking thing that's powered by nuclear power, exactly. I mean, they use it in the plot point, but it is also himself that bomb. And some people said that Godzilla was the United States. The sleeping thing that had to be woken up. And when it woke up, it became this,
Sure.
Anyway, it's fascinating. And in the United States, we've got the creature from the Black Lagoon. Because it's fucking cold, we can't do anything fucking good. It also is a lot of, I was a teenage werewolf. I was a teenage Frankenstein, daughter of Dracula. But because TV had an even tighter code than film, you start for the first time getting, in the late night, those old school movie marathons where it's 1955 and Vampira comes on in the late night to introduce the old 30s monster movies, and it's kind of funny and it's kind of campy.
Interesting.
And the reason why that's huge for us as we talk about the history of horror films is because some of the individuals sitting on their living room floor devouring this old school 30s monster horror while enjoying the 1950s atomic new stuff that was in the movie theaters include most of the pivotal filmmakers from the 80s and 90s that really created a lot of our horror. They're young teenagers watching all of these movies. At the same time, we're starting to fuck the code because we dropped the bomb. Because this is post-nuclear world.
So we're getting to counterculture.
Exactly. And not showing a man and a woman laying in bed together just seems kind of fucking stupid when we've had, two trench warfare.
Yeah.
Like, fucking, why are we doing that? And we're getting hosed because the UK doesn't have these kinds of laws. And the Hammer Studios in the UK are turning out amazing horror films starring Peter Cushing, Tarkin, right? Moff Tarkin from the Star Wars, and Christopher Lee is playing all of these great founding monsters. America finally is like, fuck this code, we gotta try.
Were they using their actors or our actors?
Their actors. I think some American actors went to the UK, but it was largely UK talent, and that was part of the reason why they were like, we gotta stop this code.
Sure.
If you want us to stay here, and not be giving this money to another industry, then start changing things. And they didn't repeal the code in the 1950s. They started to talk about it. They started to repeal a couple of things and make exceptions, but it was still firmly in place until 1968. Are you emotionally prepared to talk about the horror films of the 1960s?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the 1960s, they're tits deep in Vietnam. Technically, right? Vietnam started in 1955. And so by 1960, are we in this? Is this happening? We're doing it. Yeah, we're in it. We're doing this. Who knows with Kennedy? 1963, of course, Kennedy is assassinated. 1968, Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. are assassinated. And in 1965, Malcolm X is assassinated.
Yeah.
What this means is that the American people are tits deep in dead bodies all the time. It's on the nightly news. It's in their family. It is in the streets. It is all around them. And any sort of prudishness and like pulling punches and like adorable stuff, especially if it is implied to scare me, simply won't work. And in 1960, Alfred Hitchcock releases Psycho.
Yep.
And Psycho, of course, was a book first, like most of our favorite horror movies were. And it was one of the first to turn the public's imagination on what was shattering its image of America, which was the man Ed Gein. Ed Gein was a real guy from Plainview, Wisconsin, my home state, who murdered, we believe, only one person, but was a grave robber who made skins out of his victims and out of the bodies that he pulled out of the ground. It was horrifying. This we realized about Ed Gein in 1957. And the things he did with the bodies, he had skulls on his bedposts. Ed Gein inspired Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and countless others, specifically because of the mutilization of these human beings. It was awful. And Psycho fucked with us, man. It made people, it's still such a scary movie. And it knocked people's socks off. 1963, Alfred Hitchcock does The Birds, which is also very scary, but it's not about a person or a monster. It's nature. It's like, hey, humans, the earth itself just wants you dead. And who knows, it can come from anywhere now. And that, oh my God. And also the idea of like one small thing maybe won't be so bad, but once they have all accumulated accumulated in numbers were toast. And it was coming from the sky, which in the 1960s, anything that was going to kill you came from up there.
Right.
You know? And of course, in the 1960s, we've got the space races going on, and Sputnik has beaten us by like a decade. So we're just constantly thinking about like what's up there. Rosemary's Baby comes out in 1968. Fantastic.
Right? Yeah.
Satanists. Yes, the Rosemary's Baby, of course, is a group of occultists. Basically steal the life of this Mia Farrow, and she's naive and she's very sweet, and she gets impregnated by the devil.
Yeah,
it's very scary.
That's just another Tuesday for me, baby.
If I had a time for every time I got impregnated by the devil,
I'm like, wrap it up, buddy. Unbelievable, this guy.
I'm telling you, I don't mind, but it's the Thursday. And then one of my favorite movies, I told you I had to narrow it down. I was like, oh God, how many scary movies? This movie was also like contender for Nightmare on Elm Street. Night of the Living Dead.
Because of the zombies.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't see it until after I was already super scared of zombies. And I thought, again, I'm kind of a cunt, that these old movies from the 60s couldn't scare me because I knew 80s horror. So the 60s horror was not going to do it. So, like comedy, I'm sure everyone thinks it's very funny, but like we just won't think that's funny anymore. It was like, I don't know if the rights expired, like the copyright expired. And it was like a DVD set at Ralph's or something. And I was like throwing a Halloween party, and I was like, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna dig it out of a bin. It was like, the original Night of the Living Dead. I'll put it on mute during the Halloween party, and everyone will think I'm very interesting. And I go home for the Halloween party, and I gotta clean. And I'm like, I'll just put this on right now because I've never seen it before. Maybe it's super scary. Flash forward, I'm sitting on the couch holding like a squeegee bottle, like a squeegee, and like a Windex. And I'm just sitting on the couch, and I can't move because this movie is so fucking good.
Yeah.
And it's so fucking scary.
The pacing
And
is
I know
amazing.
it was made in 1968. And the lead actor is a black man. He is the smartest, toughest guy in this whole group. And no one mentions race.
Right.
No one calls him a name. There's not like any sort of plot tension for the fact that in 1968, this black man has slapped a white woman and is holding a gun on a black man because, you know why? Because zombies are fucking up.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Did you know that the character wasn't written as a black man? It was one of the first roles that Romero was like, yeah, Dwayne.
So the dude came in and auditioned, and they were like, you're, oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, his name is Dwayne Jones. He's like a really amazing stage actor. And Romero said he was the best guy for the role.
Perfect.
I don't know why everyone keeps talking about this. Because, people, including me, is like, whoa, what a big deal. Like, what a statement on race. And Romero was like, nah.
He's just a really good actor.
That wasn't what I was
That's
doing
amazing.
Yeah. And zombies so scary. And then the zombies kind of slow march us into the 1970s, which from music to culture, we know everything got a little fucking crazy in the 60s and the 70s. But the 70s was like, took what the 60s did and was like, how fucking nuts can we go?
Zombies on LSD.
Exactly. We can do this. And oh my God, this fucking war. Do you know this fucking war, this Vietnam War? Nixon in 72. You've got serial killers. What the fuck is with all these serial killers? You've got Son of Sam. You've got John Wayne Gacy. You've got Ted Bundy. All in this 1970s span of time. So our horror creators bring us Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Carrie, Jaws, the Amityville Horror. Jaws, by the way, also a book by Peter Benchley. So good.
Not the sequel, but...
No, that's right. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Have you seen that one?
I have.
What did you think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
So the gory stuff doesn't frighten me so much as it just is a little off-putting and disturbing. But what I liked about the whole Leatherface, I guess, mythology is that you're still trapped in a situation. You think people might help you, but no, it turns out everyone's in on it and you're kind of fucked. And that, as a concept, is terrifying.
Yeah.
So, it got me. I'm not going to say it didn't. But
And it also had this very interesting satire, which is like the nuclear family. Mom, dad, everybody gathered around the table, but they're all just psycho cannibals.
So I suspect, because the 60s in particular were a very trusting time. Like, people didn't really lock their doors. You know what I mean? It was like there was not, coming to the heels of the 50s. And so it's like, I think that this was sort of a pervertation of that. It was like, you're, like you said, maybe your neighbor's kind of a crazy person. So,
Well, exactly. And I think that they're like, generally speaking, people weren't aware of how weird could get. So like if we're in the 1950s and our weird kids in the 60s are growing their hair long, oh God, and they are staying out late and they're smoking grass. Can you believe it? And the 1970s were like, you think that's fucking weird.
Hold my joint.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to turn this up. And they did. And the two movies that I'm highlighting from the decade of the 70s are The Exorcist, 1973, often comes in number one in lists of scariest movies ever made, best horror movie ever made, movie that scares you the most. It's like The Exorcist and The Shining. When I was looking at my list, it seemed like The Exorcist and The Shining kind of go back. And The Shining, to be fair, I'm jumping ahead, is not until the 1980s, but that they kind of...
Yeah.
The Exorcist was won Best Screenplay and Best Sound. Carrie was nominated for Academy Awards, but The Exorcist won a couple, which was very exciting.
Didn't it not win Best Score? Because the song would have been the Ave Satana or whatever the hell. They were
right.
like, we can't.
Oh, that's funny. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know about score, but they did get sound.
Yeah,
that one stuck in there.
For sure. Do you know how that was filmed? Yeah.
No.
The voiceover. Mm-mm. So I forget her name, but
Linda Blair.
That's the one. Mm-hmm. So she demanded to be tied to a chair, and then she just chain smoked and drank whiskey and did all her lines that way. That's why she sounds so frustrated. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
It really does sound familiar. I know that sound.
I've had that night,
Yeah, I know that sound. Yeah. I've been there.
Oh, sure. No, just the voice too,
it's
right?
So good. And you want to know how you watched a horror movie? Mm-hmm. Oh, I watched The Exorcist for the first time alone as a teenage girl with my mom out of town. I lived 1 block away from the local jail. I have no idea what I was thinking. I still don't think I'm right. Like I managed to, I still think like I'm 43. I have a child. I still think there's probably something up because of that night I watched The Exorcist by myself.
I think I've seen that film probably 3 or 4 times. And every time I watch it again, something new pops. Because I saw it as a kid as well.
And are you Catholic?
No.
Because Catholics say it's scarier for them.
I went to Catholic school. But the scary thing about Catholicism is the nuns. Yeah. And they didn't hit me with rulers, but they had rosaries that were like marble, and they would wrecking ball them to the side of the head because I'm an inquisitive indiviol and questions are not.
Well, I wanted to hit you several times throughout this. I understand.
I think, but I suspect it in a different way. But
now kindly undo these straps.
Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween comes out in 1978, which clearly put the flavor in everyone's mouth that we've been trying to kind of match since for like the decades. It was like, okay, we got virgins, we got sex, we've got babysitters, we've got psycho, we've got a crazy killer that we don't need to explain too much. We just need to say that it's rooted in evil. It's rooted in an old evil that happened probably in the generation prior, which is very Cold War stuff, right? We're still sitting here with all of these fears of nukes and whatever because of what my parents and my fucking grandparents have some beef with Germany and Russia. I don't exactly get it, but I know communists are bad. And they just keep coming. And
Have you met them?
And they wear a lot of jumpsuits.
Who needs that much?
I don't know.
It's either chambray or jean.
Exactly. And the suburbs are death. The suburbs equal death. Sex equals death. And these our rules are coming often from Halloween.
Good call.
And then the last one, which I haven't seen, most people I don't think haven't. It was 1972. It's called The Last House on the Left, and it is a first film by a guy named Wes Craven.
Ooh,
who's a nice little Baptist boy from Ohio who had previously made a lot of porn and decided to try horror. And
what if his porn's also super creepy? I can't
There's
finish.
only one way to find out. We'll be right back. Jose and I are going to watch some of Wes's early work.
I wonder if any of those models are like, no, I've worked with Wes Craven.
Yes.
What if I don't want to get into that?
Yeah, that would be great. That's actually a very smooth way to introduce, be like, I'm going to take the ladies over to watch some of Mr. Craven's student films. Wes Craven, of course, is the guy who dominates the 80s horror film craze. He directed Nightmare on Elm Street, my favorite. And the 1980s itself is often called a carnival of horror because it was the genesis of so many amazing horror characters and franchises. And that is what we're going to talk about when we come back.
I look forward to it. Perfect.
Have you ever thought there must be more to life than tequila shots, beer, and hard seltzers? Have you ever wanted to take your home bartending game beyond mixing a mean vodka soda or rum and coke?
Well, I'm Join Jules, and I'm teaching people how to make a delicious craft cocktail using fresh ingredients in the comfort of your home.
And I am Uncle Brad. I am a self-proclaimed cocktail historian and the best damn home bartender in my house. I'm all about teaching people how to make a classic cocktail the right way.
So we're starting this podcast, The Art of Drinking, to not only teach you bartending tips and tricks, but each episode will give you 2 cocktail recipes,
one classic traditional approach,
and one with a modern twist. The whole time, we'll be sharing about the history of the drink or even stories about some of the ingredients that we used.
Think of this as a classroom, only you're drinking and there's no test. Every week, class is going to be in session and we will release new episodes so you have time to get to the store, buy the goods, and have a drink and a story to tell for the weekend. The Art of Drinking with Join Jules and your favorite uncle is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can follow me at Join Jules on both Instagram and TikTok, and you can also learn more about these episodes by visiting the website joinjules.com. And don't forget, you can always find your favorite Uncle Brad at Cigars and Vino. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and get ready to sip and enjoy your way to the weekend.
Hey, listen, before we rejoin Jose for our little stroll through the graveyard here, a special thanks to those who keep the flesh on my bones, my patrons. The latest to carve their names on our headstone are James K. and Lily B. And if you'd like to add your name to my little black book, there are links in the show notes that will take you to Patreon or buy me a coffee. And you can also, as always, show the pod some love by leaving us a rating and a review, sharing your favorite episode with a friend, and going to Instagram where you can
Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow.
Question: what was the first horror film you ever saw?
I think technically it's probably King Kong. Because it was the 1930s King Kong and it was on TV.
The original
Black and white King Kong.
You can still see the zipper.
Yes. And also cried. It scared me. It made me jump. That hand coming through the window. Like I remember and her scream was so good. But then when he died, I cried and cried and cried. And my sister and I, because I have a dead dog thing, Godzilla, King Kong, all these, they're all dead dogs to me by the end of the movie. And I have had too many dead dogs in my life. So by the time, I don't care how big it is, you're holding a paw and watching them stop breathing. And I'm just like, we burned a few buildings. I don't know why we couldn't leave them.
So King Kong. Okay.
King Kong. What was the first horror movie you saw?
Child's Play.
Chucky.
Yeah, in theaters in Mexico.
Ooh.
I still remember sitting in that chair and being like, why the fuck am I here? This is terrifying.
Chucky came out like 1987.
I was born in 1986.
So you saw it when you were 1?
No, but it probably got a late release in Mexico. So it must have been like 3 or 4.
Okay.
Good on mom. Being like, he can handle it.
Yeah. You know what? Life is scary, Jose.
He'll want less toys.
Yeah.
Win-win.
One of the reasons why the 80s is the carnival of horror, is considered the boom of horror film to this point, is because of the VHS store.
Sure.
Did you have VHS stores growing up?
Yes.
Where did you rent your movies?
Not in Mexico. I'm sure, but I don't want to be like, what is that VHS?
Where did you go?
We reenact the film.
Maria would hold up a sheet.
Yeah. Very, very groundlings.
How exciting. I wish I could see it.
No. We had the Blockbuster in San Diego.
Yes.
And so, and because we grew up risibly poor, and how I fell in love with cinema is that was the one thing we could do. So my mom would order a pizza.
Yes.
She'd take us to Blockbuster.
Yes.
I'd pick a movie. The sister would pick a movie, and then she'd just get the same thing every time. Yes. And then we would watch it, and then she would force us to discuss it.
Mom.
So it was like our family thing.
Oh God, I remember it was 1985. Our family got the VHS player for Christmas, and it came with a VHS of A Christmas Story. And we never had a Blockbuster in my hometown. It was too small. Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, middle of nowhere. We had a family video, but my sisters and my dad worked in the same grocery store, and the grocery store had like a very small video section. So we would get them there. But how the VCR really came through is that we had cousins with cable in the city.
And they would record it.
And they would record HBO and Cinemax on our blank tapes. And we would watch most of our movies that way. But when we were lucky enough to go to the big video store, you know this feeling. Jose, you named it exactly. You get a pizza, you pick your snack, and the fear of the movie you wanted being out. The days when there would be a huge release and you would have like the wall of Titanic. They would have like 100 copies of the one movie that was out, but you still had to get there quick. And horror just exploded along with the VHS. Everyone knows that taking your date to a horror film is a great way to get laid. But like, it's so much easier if you're on your couch in your house doing
the original
watching the horror movie.
Netflix and chill.
Come on. And I remember looking at the horror movie wall and just trying not to get scared by the covers of the tapes. Like, I never saw Hotel Hell, but I remember vividly the VHS cover of Hotel Hell. And we could churn them out, and they were making a lot of money. You could major in film in very prestigious universities like UCLA and USC. And so film in general had reached this certain point. Technology had reached this certain point, and then the VHS sent distribution far beyond the Cineplex, and horror stretched her disgusting, rotten yams. 1980, we get The Shining.
Yeah.
Which I had a hard time not talking about because it's so good. Stanley Kubrick's. You don't seem to agree. I can tell by your face you just don't think it's as scary as everyone else does.
I'm going to be honest with you. No. Nothing against...
Okay, hold on. I'm going to tell this story. So if you haven't seen The Shining, it is generally the story of Jack, a guy with writer's block, his wife Wendy, their son Danny, Shelley Duvall. They're going to go to the Overlook Hotel where he's the winter caretaker so he can shake loose this writer's block. His son has psychic abilities. The hotel's kind of haunted, wants to kill him. Lots of dead bodies, lots of scary stuff. Jack ultimately hunts down his family with an axe.
Yes. So, but also not the writer's block. He was a writer, but he has a temper, and he was an alcoholic. And
he's talking about the book.
Well, I'm just giving you a better backstory.
But you and Stephen King, by the way, both don't like this movie.
I know.
Stephen King didn't care for the movie
So that's
either.
the thing. Listen, and this is an unpopular opinion, and I know that I stand alone in this one, but but artsy for the purpose of artsy bothers me. Like, tell me the fucking story. I don't need you to give me 15 minutes of pitch black. That's silly.
You didn't feel that choice built the suspense
or
made it scarier. You were just like, get it together, Stanley.
Like, listen, we got the monkeys. Make it happen. What are we doing here?
Do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I also thought that Danny was miscast. We completely glossed over The Shining, his ability to shine, which is, and also it's just a haunted hotel. They don't explain his powers. If he's like a battery, and it's like, they didn't explain the guy in the dog suit.
Come and play with us, Danny.
Jose, I'm glad you brought this up because you talked earlier about the scary books that got you first were the Stephen King books. And when we get into 1980s horror girl, Stephen King is the source and the source material for so much. Just absorb for a moment and the list of scary shit that comes just from Stephen King. Okay? It, Carrie, Christine, Cujo, The Dead Zone, Misery, Needful Things, Dolores Claiborne, Creepshow, Maximum Overdrive, Salem's Lot, The Mist, Pet Sematary,
that's the one.
The Tommyknockers, The Stand. And that's just the scary shit. He also, of course, wrote, or was the source material for, Stand By Me, The Running Man, Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, 11/22/63, and countless episodes of television. He ain't done.
No.
But he keeps writing. Nightmare on Elm Street, this is the plot. Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp, is one of a group of teenagers from this high school who are having horribly realistic dreams so realistic, in fact, if they die in their dream, they die in real life. They're all being hunted by Freddy Krueger, horribly burned, razor blades on his fingers from his glove. He is the murdered serial killer. Turns out their parents, all these teenagers' parents, had cornered him and burned him alive because he got away with the crime, which is so 80s because it's crimes of our parents, Cold War stuff, right? It is
Frontier justice too.
Frontier justice. It's girl power, right? And it's just so fantastic. And also feeding into the serial killer love, and it has that sort of campy, you know, kill the babysitter. Nancy's very importantly a virgin. It's fantastic. Now, this list of 80s horror films is too long. It is incomplete because there were 100 horror films made in 1987 alone, in just the United States alone. Wow. So I'm going to give you a list of 80s horror films simply because I love them. And because I don't know when or why you're listening to this, but if you're like, oh, I'm looking for a good horror movie, chances are you forgot about a couple of these. If there's one that you're like, ooh, stop me, okay? Friday the 13th, which, by the way, of course, from the get-go was a ripoff of Halloween. They even said it. The guys who made it were like, yeah, oh, Halloween did really well. We were like, we want to do that. So they picked a date that's kind of spooky.
The poster just says, if you liked Halloween, you're going to love this movie.
It does. We're going to kill some teenagers. We're going to get a murderer that had something to do with his parents. Done, you know. All right, so Friday the 13th starts in the 80s. Poltergeist.
Oh.
Ugh, right? So scary. Children of the Corn. April Fool's Day. American Werewolf in London, Child's Play, Fright Night, Hellraiser, Sleepaway Camp, Evil Dead, Gremlins, Slumber Party Massacre, Lost Boys, The Fly, Near Dark, The Thing, Ghostbusters, Christine, Cujo, Creepshow, Prom Night, Pumpkinhead, and Night of the Comet.
Why don't you do it again? Slowly.
Okay, Friday the 13th. And I mean, crazy, right? And here's what's nuts. And you kind of raised your eyebrows. So 87, I said, was the peak. They call it the peak of horror films because there were 100 in the US alone. 1987 is also considered by people, pop culture historians, everybody, the peak of stand-up comedy.
Oh.
In the United States.
Fair enough.
I don't think it's unrelated that horror and comedy peaked in the United States in the exact same year. And one of the ways you can tell is because of how many great horror comedies there are. It's one of my favorite genres. Not all of these were made in the 1980s, but just to give you an idea of the genre, right?
Sure.
The tension in the release. We just love it. Gremlins, Ghostbusters, The Burbs. I consider Sleepy Hollow. Because Sleepy Hollow, I think, and it wants you to laugh. Like, it gives you some goofiness. No?
Sure. No, yeah. I felt that way about Carrie, if I'm being honest with you.
Carrie's kind of funny. Evil Dead, fantastic. American Werewolf in London. So funny. Shaun of the Dead, Scary Movie, and Krampus.
Oh, sure.
Oh. And Krampus brings us into that other subgenre of Christmas horror, which is fantastic. Krampus, Scrooged, which Krampus and Scrooged have the irony of being horror, comedy, Christmas. That's crazy trifecta. But just horror Christmas, Night of the Comet. Do you know about Night of the Comet? Oh, I encourage you to watch Night of the Comet.
Okay.
It's post-apocalyptic. A comet goes by on Christmas Eve. And part of the reason why this movie is set on Christmas is because they shot in LA and it was low budget. And they didn't have the money to clear locations, so they just had to write in all the Christmas shit that was going to be
so funny
all over these like vacant streets in downtown.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. That's hilarious.
Exactly. But comet goes by and it kills almost everyone on Earth, and the 1% that are left are either okay or flesh-eating zombies. Yes. Silent Night, Bloody Night, and Santa Sleigh.
What about Black Christmas?
Oh, I've never seen Black Christmas.
It's a newer one. It is parody, but I was brought to the theater not with that knowledge, and I kept looking around like this can't.
Are we gonna let this happen?
Yeah, I was like, this can't be real. Like, is this real? What is happening? And then later, someone was like, no, it's parody, and I was like, you could have prepped. You could have prepped a fella.
But it also anticipates our next decade. Okay, because we're entering the 90s. Important thing about the 90s. Berlin Wall came down in 1989. So this Cold War monster thing that was real or, conscious or subconscious, it's kind of done. Like, the Russians are fine. Oops. Y2K fear, we're already kind of looking down the barrel. Like, this isn't just the end of the century. This is the end of the millennium.
Yeah, sure.
And we don't know everything. Y2K was like the easiest way to like quantify how we were all going to die, but we kind of generally had resigned to the fact that like it's over. We also have Columbine.
Yeah.
Special effects get great in the 90s. You saw it in Jurassic Park. You see it in Independence Day, and it is also happening in horror. And we've seemed to like, because the 80s were so fucking crazy great, we've pushed the boundaries to parody, right? Also, your friend Dawn is in high school. And so the horror films of the 90s are in my, I care about these too. The very first one, in fact, I'm going to talk about is Scream. And the reason why is because Scream is the response to the 80s. Now, Wes Craven, here's what's so amazing. Wes Craven, who made a bulk or was involved in so many of those iconic 80s films, parodies himself and somehow gets scarier. It's so, and here's me. Okay, I told you Mom's out of town a lot. Dawn loves horror movies. Dawn is 17. Dawn, in fact, identifies with Drew Barrymore more than anyone else because Drew Barrymore and I were born one day apart.
Oh.
So I was her age in E.T.
Oh.
I'm her age in Scream. Charlie's Angels, hello, she's still a cover girl. So am I. Like, me and Drew Barrymore.
Couldn't agree more.
And this movie, we know from the trailers, is about scary movies. Okay, can't wait. And the opening scene is Drew Barrymore, teenage, alone in her house watching scary movies because her parents are out. Oh my God. I already am Drew Barrymore, and now we're doing the thing we're doing. And she gets a call from a stranger. I answer calls from strangers, 100%. And I chat with those idiots. This is 100% me.
I noticed when I called her, she doesn't have my number, and you were like, hello? I was like,
I always answer unknown numbers. Who are you, and how can I help? And even when he starts getting weird, it's like, and he wants to talk about horror movies. Me too. And then he fucking kills her.
Yeah.
Drew Barrymore is dead. And that's like, well, what the fuck? I went into the movie theater with my girlfriends. Oh my God, you guys are gonna scream your heads off. I can't wait to watch you guys lose your shit when you see Scream. I'm not gonna get scared because I live on horror films, basically. A minute into this, I'm in my friend's armpit. I'm under two jackets. I'm watching Drew through like the zipper of a coat because I can't stand how scared I am, and they never let me go. I love Scream.
Wow.
Love it. And in terms of the zeitgeist, it wasn't just me. And I should tell you, Scream, by the way, if you haven't seen it. High school student Sydney Prescott. Her mother's died, was murdered. Some guy's in jail for it. She's alone a lot. And her two classmates ultimately hunt down and murder a bulk of them. Yeah. Wearing the ghost face costume.
Yeah.
But the zeitgeist too is the kids are not all right.
Right. Yeah.
Scream came out a year before Columbine.
Wow.
TV is raising our kids.
Yeah.
Our kids are addicted to these screens and they're not doing well. We are drugging them to pretend that they're doing well and that they're happy. And we're acting like there's nothing that serious bubbling under the surface. And we're trying to force these kids to pretend like they're excited about a future that is beige and in a grid and on Prozac.
Yeah, debt and indecision.
And the suburbs still equal death. That's been true since 1940s. If you move to the suburbs, you're going to die. 91, Silence of the Lambs, which is a phenomenal film, and it is the only horror film to win Best Picture. And the year that Silence of the Lambs won Best Picture, it also won Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay.
Yeah, I'll bet.
We were real ready
in
the 90s to get that kind of scared. And then at the end of the 90s, swooping in 1999 is The Blair Witch Project. Did you see The Blair Witch Project?
Of course I saw it. In theaters, mind you.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. What did you know going in? Did you know that it was... For those of you who don't know, The Blair Witch Project is a found footage film. The premise, very heavily displayed and permeated by the filmmakers, is that this is footage that was found from a group of students who went out into the woods in 1994 to pursue this folktale of the Blair Witch. And they disappeared, and no one's seen them since. And we found these tapes, and we've just pieced together the tapes to show you a horror film. And it is so goddamn scary.
It was a masterclass, and it was so unique.
And the marketing that they did for this, they had put up missing posters of the people all around where the movie was being portrayed. None of the actors showed up at any of the premieres or did any kind of press, of course, because they were dead. Supposed to be dead. There's no music, of course, so there's no score, and it is absolutely shit rocked me. I remember seeing that similar to Scream, thinking nothing's gonna scare me. I've seen it all. I can't be rocked. I didn't sleep for a week.
It was done so well too, because it had an extra element, because you're watching one character sort of go insane and you're like, oh, I see, he's the psycho. There is no Blair Witch because they're freaking out about the rocks.
Right. This is a mystery movie.
Right.
We're gonna learn which one of these kids killed the other ones, right?
And then no, but in fact there is the witch. And I love that they didn't really show her to us, because had they, like in Signs, remember Signs?
Yes.
It was amazing until they showed me the fucking alien.
Yeah.
I liked when he walks by.
Oh,
terrifying.
Jump
All of us,
scare.
everyone in the we collectively jumped. And then they showed him and I was like, you fucked me up. What are you doing? Yeah, they should have left it alone. But anyway, no, it was done super, super well.
And if you probably, whether or not you even saw the movie, you probably had from the popular culture the image of that up the nose, cut off, girl in a stocking cap, just like, I'm gonna die. I don't know. I can't see anything behind me, and it's just a super tight on my face, and it's just like snot and tears and super realistic, and you don't know what's behind her either, and you know, and it's what it is a fucking 22-year-old guy just like scraping a fucking stick on the back of her tent while he tells her to keep going. I mean, but it doesn't matter. This movie is so scary.
Yeah.
People were kind of heartbroken and when Blair Witch, when it came out, you know, and after it won all this stuff and everyone's making all this money and it's crazy, and they were like, oh, we were kidding, and everyone was like, what?
Well, it's such an innocent time in those days. You could do that. Like, with the ubiquity of social media.
Because they made a website that said, this is true, these people are missing.
So did Fourth Kind, by the way.
Oh, that's right. They did the similar thing.
So, and I didn't, I'm in a rock.
Oh, but you went to the website, of course.
Yeah, and I was like, well, this looks...
So what I'm going to do now is tell you, kind of like I did with the 80s, I'm going to go down the list of great 90s horror films, scary movies. There's not as many, but there's a good they did good.
The Good
90s
Son?
did good.
Is The Good Son on there?
I didn't put it on my list, but I will put it in my brain.
Okay.
I don't know about The Good Son. What's that one?
Macaulay Culkin, Elijah Wood.
Oh, fuck, yeah, because that was like The Bad Seed, like the remake of The Bad Seed. Yeah. I have Arachnophobia.
Ooh.
Flatliners. Ghost. It, the TV series, the miniseries on TV is so good.
Tim Curry, yeah.
Misery, Nightbreed, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. Tales from the Dark Side was like a popular horror series, kind of. Oh, all right. Tremors.
Oh, Tremors.
Halloween H2O. That is my very first go-to out of the gate. We're starting Halloween time. Halloween H2O. I like Josh Hartnett.
I'm going to join you. Not here. I mean,
you're welcome to join me.
I'll watch it on my house.
You can squeeze right between me and my husband. This is Jose. He's Halloween H2O. 7. Ringu.
Oh, 7. Dang. I haven't thought
Cape Fear. Bram Stoker's Dracula with Winona Ryder. It's all right. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie.
Sure.
I Know What You Did Last Summer. Candyman. Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, Interview with a Vampire, yeah.
Blade. The Frighteners. Remember that with Michael J. Fox? And then Twister, which I include only because I want to just tip my head to like what's scaring us in the 90s. Natural disaster films. Huge. We were similar like The Birds did. It was like, yeah, there's a lot coming. And like Earth, like God, like everything. Like the world wants to just destroy us. Yeah. In any way it can.
I guess in my head, the pivotal film of the 90s was Titanic. Would have been 96, but obviously not
100%.
Necessarily a horror film, even though it is a disaster film.
I would say that there are moments where there are some horrors on. Like it's scary, but no.
Yeah, no.
But it is the movie of the 90s or Jurassic Park. But see, they seem like they were both in the same decade, but they seem really far apart, and that is in large part because of just what the 90s was doing with special effects and film in general. Like, the 90s were a great time for film in general.
Yeah.
Life finds a way.
If the 90s was sensing it's the end of the millennium, and it's like crazy, things are bubbling under the surface, it was actualized very early into the 2000s. We start the 2000s with, like, American Psycho.
Yeah.
And like, kind of like, like something's going on. And then of course we get 9/11.
Yeah.
And on September 2001, that thing that maybe we were waiting for through the 90s, if this is indicating what we were afraid of, this is it. It was the pinnacle. It was those two planes into those two buildings. And then the following reaction of just decades of war in the Middle East.
Yep.
And So 28 Days Later is one of the first movies that comes out in 2002.
Oh,
and
yeah.
28 Days Later is a zombie movie. It's a post-apocalyptic movie, but it is very psychological, very dark. It really, really seems to ask the question, what are you going to do at the end of the world?
Yeah.
And you have to answer it in all of its complexity.
And the bifurcation of the good people and the bad people.
A biker, but what happens in this one is a bicycle courier wakes up from a coma and he realizes this highly contagious virus has made people crazy aggressive skin eaters, and they fast. Oh God, that's the other fucking thing with 28 Days Later that really shook up
good,
Don
yeah.
Brody. Is these zombies got fast, man.
Yeah.
My zombie apocalypse plan, which is flawless, by the way, shook. If these zombies be fast, nothing I planned on will work out.
Are you planning against virus zombies or voodoo zombies?
100% virus zombies. If they bite you, you turn into a zombie.
Okay.
That's the rule.
Okay.
And I'm not risking it, by the way. If you get bit by a zombie, I shovel to the brains. You and my mama. Anybody get bit by a zombie in my apocalypse, I don't wait around. I don't start a timer. You're done.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, no,
I think it's important we're clear. It's kind of a first date speech for me usually. 2004, Saw.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Wow.
Torture porn.
Yeah.
Saw is one of those movies where, like, you know, people are like, I love horror films, but I hate slasher gore like Saw.
Sure.
You know, and it hits you in an entirely different way. It is coined torture porn. The premise of Saw is that the jigsaw killer kidnaps his victims in these elaborate orchestrated games.
Machinations and stuff.
Yeah, machines and triggers and things that destroy your body, but also test you psychologically. And it's...
I think the whole thing behind that was two student filmmakers couldn't afford a bunch of studios. They could just afford one room, so they just wrote a screenplay around that.
Completely. James Wan, he's an Australian director. He was also inspired by the Blair Witch Project, right? To just kind of do it with what you have. And the location, it's easy. You can control your location. But they did get Cary Elwes and Danny Glover.
That's true. That's
not
true.
Too low budget.
Well, that's where the budget went.
That's right. And then 2007, we get Paranormal Activity, which is the pinnacle of found footage. The premise here is that guy's wife is kind of complaining of something maybe like ghosts, or she's just getting bothered at night, and so he sets up your standard run-of-the-mill anyone can afford this crap cameras to put in his house, which captures in the eerie darkness of what these cameras, these baby monitor cameras can do.
He was a day trader, so he had money.
I suppose.
You saw that house.
And speaking of day trading, this Paranormal Activity is the highest grossing film of all time when compared to investment. Their budget for Paranormal Activity was $15,000.
What? What do they pay the actors?
And it grossed $193 million. And they make one every year. Saw 2. They made a Saw movie every year, almost every year. From 2004 to 2009.
I was going to say, like, we were like a Saw 8, no? Saw 5 maybe?
Saw, and then there's like, the Jigsaw Killer did great. And Paranormal Activity, there's a new one coming out right now.
Yeah. Well, I know they teased it in Insidious, the new Saw.
Yeah, and James Wan directed Insidious, and The Conjuring.
All of those. Those are my favorites.
Those so scary.
For me, those were the game changers. Those were the ones that I was like, oh, okay, this is what horror films should be.
And you know what the Insidious and The Conjuring do really well, The Conjuring in particular, is it really is the coalescence of so much good horror stuff, in that it's sort of based on a true story, represents something that they tell you is
the Warrens.
Real, the Warrens, and also taking in the new technology that we have, and an incredible sound design.
Good acting.
So good.
And in my opinion, the most important part, they had humor.
And it's kind of fun.
You laughed, and you were like, oh, it's like it was a roller coaster. I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And the 2000s, in addition to those pinnacle films, we have Shaun of the Dead, Constantine. I included Snakes on a Plane. I don't know why. I saw it on the list, and I was like, sure.
Then I demand you add Anaconda to your 90s and Congo.
Done. It's inserted. Human Centipede.
Ooh.
What the hot fuck. That one, of course, about a weird German doctor who attaches people's mouths to anuses in an endless chain. Fantastic.
As you do.
The Mist. Coraline. I thought that what Leica and Claymation was doing with kind of horror and spooky stuff is so fantastic. Drag Me to Hell.
Oh, sure.
And Cloverfield, and of course, The Fourth Kind in 2009.
There it is. Oh, it's 2009. It's 2004. Got it. Yeah.
And then we get into the 2010s. Now, what's happening here is what happens with all history is we're getting kind of close. So I can speak a little bit to the history, but I'm too close to it to do the thing that historians can usually do. So I'm going to have all of my blind spots. But 2010s, what do you call them? It's not the aughts. The aughts we know, but the tens, the teen. It's such a fucking. It's like your.
I'm just glad we're at the 20s again because now we can call it something. Now we can call them
exactly. I felt so out of place in the tens. Anyway, starting in the tens, we started 2010 in the middle of Obama's first term, and in 2019, we are. Not only in the middle of Trump, but we have our toes over COVID. That seems crazy to me, but it makes sense because the response to all this stuff, like Get Out came out in 2017. And one of the things, and that's Jordan Peele's amazing, it's about an interracial college age couple. He's black, she's white. She takes him home to meet her very liberal white parents.
We voted for Obama.
I would have voted for him again. Yeah, exactly. And they are stealing the bodies of black people to live in them and make them live longer. It is such a good movie. It's so scary and so of the 2010s, right?
And so funny.
Also because Jordan Peele was, of course, known to us first as a comedian. He won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Us came out in 2019, and Nope is out right now.
Did you see Nope?
Newest. I haven't seen it yet.
Neither have I.
I hear people like it. Parasite came out in 2019.
Yes.
That's the Bong Joon-ho.
So good.
Best picture. Some people say it was the best movie of the decade. Disclaimer-free genre.
So good.
Doesn't matter. It's funny. That one's about generally a poor family's scheme to be employed by a wealthy family. It is about race, class. Also very funny.
And the twist. The twist.
And the twist. They say you keep thinking you think you know what this movie is. You do not know what this movie is.
No, so good. When did Contagion come out?
I think in the 2010s, but I don't know the exact date. Let me look.
If you would have seen that, I watched that during quarantine.
I know that during COVID, the movie had not done very well, and then during COVID,
it just exploded.
Because we needed to see our worst fears played out. And that is where The Purge comes in, because The Purge also came out in 2013.
Oh,
and that's a James Monaco. The Purge. The Purge, also super low budget. Generally, it's set in a crime, not too distant future from 2013. Essentially, it was set in 2022, which is right now. And it's this crime-free future. Kind of seems very utopic, but it turns out that one night a year for 12 hours. That's The Purge, and all crime is
legal,
decriminalized, including murder. And we follow it from the point of view of Ethan Hawke, who has sort of been a part of this home security system that has preserved and kept his family and himself safe from this annual purge until tonight. God, so good.
Make the decision to save somebody or not, right?
Yeah, which is a Twilight Zone sort of thing.
This is not a test.
The movie Contagion came out in 2011. So that is a 2010 zeitgeist thing. Exactly. So if you think about what Scream was afraid of right before Columbine, and you think about what Contagion and The Purge were afraid of right before, you really have to tip your hat to what our horror artists are tapping into that either we're not listening to in other arenas or we're not ready to, right? Other great scary movies from the 2010s, Black Swan, I Spit on Your Grave, Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods was fantastic.
So good. Talk about a great twist. And Taking the Rules, right? The Conjuring and Insidious, The Babadook.
I hated The Babadook.
It scared me.
It was just, it's just because the name Babadook sounds so delightful to me that it's not scary.
I get it. What We Do in the Shadows.
So good.
Hush. Did you see Hush?
Oh my God.
Oh, Hush is so good. It's about a woman trapped in her house and she's deaf.
Yes, she is deaf. She's a writer.
She's a writer, and there's a predator in a mask who apparently knows is taking the mask up and down. So scary. Goosebumps, Krampus, Bird Box, A Quiet Place. Bird Box is great.
A Quiet Place is fantastic.
Midsummer. And then I put Stranger Things and Walking Dead on this list too, just because they're not quote unquote movies, but they fill into what we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
And girl, that brings us to where we are now. I think we can all agree that the 20s are a horror film. I mean, really, we know. I mean, whatever your perspective is, you can even be like, I'm having a great time. My life has never been better. And it is absolutely a horror show. Between the natural disasters, climate change, wildfires, what's happening politically, what's happening virally, it is hard not to just be scared. And horror films have to kind of go for it if they're going to and help us out. And Nope came out this year. I have not seen it, but I do think that what was happening with like Get Out and Parasite is that we're hearing from different voices. We're not being scared by the same cultures and the same people that in Western American cinema.
Well, look at Squid Games,
which is great. I forgot to mention Squid Games. I've just started watching it. Oh my God. Good. And one of the beautiful things about Squid Game, scary, gory, and no one's trapped. Yeah. The amount of time they take to give the victims a choice is illuminating. It's so great.
Yeah, no, it's done very well.
Other than that, here's what we've got so far for the 2020s. It's a lot of kind of remake. Candyman remake.
Terrible.
More Conjuring, more Stranger Things, more Paranormal Activity, more Purges, more Halloweens, more Screams,
Ghostbusters,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, and serial killer docs. So I'm sure that there is, if history has shown us what's happening, and if the perusal of these previous decades is as illuminating as I hope it is, right now we've got some new horror
coming,
being created and written and made by young people who are probably kicking ass, and they're going to get me yet again coming in smug to some theater someday being like, oh, good luck. Oh, what's supposed to be scary about this? And I'll end up, in somebody's armpit.
Do you believe in ghosts?
No.
Oh, interesting.
No, I don't. I do believe in complex existence. And I do believe in various states of consciousness that would explain to me the phenomenon understood as ghosts.
But not metaphysical.
I don't believe that the personified spirit of a human being moves around interacting with the living.
What about saunters?
I'm not sure what that is. I do believe in extraterrestrial life. I do believe in aliens.
Okay.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I'm open to the possibility.
One of my many weird jobs is I used to be a tour guide at the Wabasha Street Caves in St. Paul, Minnesota. They're old bootleggers' caves. They were a secret nightclub during the 1930s. I mean, it is this very cool. If you're ever in St. Paul, Minnesota, do not sleep on the Wabasha Street Caves. It is a cool tour. It's a cool event place. It's very neat. And lots of people died in there. Lots of people died in these caves. Gunned down in the 30s. They have bullet holes in the walls. And in the times that the caves were unoccupied, unhoused people with various intentions would go in there and die all the time. And they'd find bodies in there every now and again. I laid tours through this place, often at night, often highlighting the scary and the ghosty stuff because that's what people want to see. I am a cynic. I, quote unquote, don't believe it. When you are done with your... and people are constantly showing me pictures like this. Pictures they've taken during my tour. Pictures that somebody else took. There are ghost hunters in there every other week. It is a very, very common hotspot. And the only way to shut the caves down at the end of the night, which I had to do hundreds of times, is to start at the very back, work your way slowly forward, turning the lights off behind you. Ugh. It is cold in there because it's a cave. It's obviously dark, pitch black. I mean, the darkest of dark. And sound echoes strangely in any kind of cave, but they're like 7 adjoined caves. So like where sound is coming from doesn't matter.
Whoa.
And I was in there alone, shutting it down on a number of occasions. I often ran out with my heart up in my throat. Do I believe it? No. Did I entertain for a second any of the invitations to spend the night? Never.
Sure.
Yeah. Why not, Dawn? I'm a tattooed redhead who loves smoking dope. I've seen these movies. I'm never making it out of these caves alive.
That's funny.
I will have been dead for hours by the time the Virgin climbs out of here.
That's hilarious.
Well, Jose, I cannot have imagined a better way to spend the time that we have spent together.
Same.
Thank you so much. Tell me, you're going to go watch a scary movie tonight, right?
You know what? I'm going to watch a scary movie tonight.
You're going to watch a scary movie tonight. What are you going to watch?
I'll tell you what. I'm going to let you pick what I watch. And then I will give you a little report on what I thought.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm going to have you watch a movie I have not seen yet, and I'm going to watch it too, and then we're going to report back and tell each other what we thought.
Perfect.
Because I came upon this film. It's a 1980s horror film that I didn't know existed, and a lot of people love. It's called The Thing, starring Kurt Russell.
Oh, no, I've seen The Thing.
You've seen The Thing.
But I will watch The Thing again.
You watch The Thing.
Because it's been years.
Okay, you watch The Thing. I'm going to watch The Thing for the first time. And I will watch movies with you anytime, Jose.
Perfect.
You are a joy and a delight, and I thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks again to Jose Barrientos. What a guy. Listen, you should follow him right now on social media, and then also go find out where he's performing live, which you can do by clicking on all of the show notes in our episode description. As for us, your next new HILF episode is right around the corner. And until then, a reminder that our theme song was composed and performed by Kat Perkins, and that you can find my sources, links to the books, documentaries, and articles I reference in the summary of this episode, or by emailing us, hilfpodcast@gmail.com, or messaging us on social media @hilfpodcast. And if you'd like to leave a little cash on the nightstand, hey, we'd be very grateful. You can find us on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. Links to these and more are all in the show notes. This has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history is a party and everybody's coming.